Welcome to Deep Tech Musings Podcast. This is Pronojit Saha. You might have heard about the audio-only social app called Clubhouse. If not, then I strongly urge you to check out. Today's episode is a recording of the first ever session of DTM Podcast on Clubhouse. We had a discussion around the Earth observation industry with all the three founders of SkyServe.ai, an Indian deep tech startup which is on a mission to democratize Earth observation by providing easily accessible real-time insights at a cost that's more affordable for customers. Also joining us was Michael Mealing, who is a VC at Starbridge, a prominent outfit in the space tech investment arena. He shared some deep insights into the industry, which only comes with experience. We also had an excellent audience posing some super interesting questions. So do listen to this recording and also follow me on Clubhouse. My handle is @Pronojit and listen in live to the next episodes. Thanks all for joining today. As you would know from the topic, we will be discussing about Earth observation industry, which is very lucrative space tech opportunity in current scenario. And we have the founders of an Indian startup called SkyServe to discuss more about it. So the way we will run this is for the first 20-25 minutes, we will have an overview of the Earth observation industry in general. And then we'll open up the floor for some questions. And post that, we will take some more insights inside a story of SkyServe particularly and take it forward from there. So first things, some quick intros. I am Pronojit Saha. I am the AI practice head as well as the founder and host of Deep Tech Musings podcast, wherein we host various deep tech startups every week. So be sure to check out the show link is there in my bio and more information you can find out there. I would also like to introduce Michael, who is on the stage. Michael, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Pronojit. My name is Michael Mealing. I'm one of the general partners at Starbridge Venture Capital. We're a space tech-focused venture fund, been around since late 2017. I've been in the space industry since the early 2000s. In addition to that, I'm also the president of the Moon Society and on the board of an organization called the Alliance for Space Development. And I also run the Space VC open office hours room from noon until 2 Eastern time on Tuesdays. So for anyone in the room that's either looking at investing in the sector or is an entrepreneur looking to create a startup or raise money, that's one of the two main topics that we talk about. So anyone that's interested in even the entrepreneurs in the room want some advice for how to start a company in this sector, be sure to go look us up on Tuesday. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Pleasure having you here today. Next, we'd like to call up the founders of SkyServe, starting with Vishesh. Vishesh, can you share your quick intro?
Yeah, hi Pranajit. Thanks for having us. So I have a background in aerospace industry, bachelor's in aerospace engineering, followed by 6 years in a company called Team Indus. So Team Indus was the first Indian company who was doing private aerospace in India in a big way. So we were one of the 3 teams which were qualified for the 3 top teams in the Google Lunar X Prize. And happily, we were building a lunar lander. So 6 years there as a GNC guy there. I came out of Team Indus in 2019 and we started SkyServe in 2020. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Next, Vinay.
Hey, hi Pranojit. Thank you for having us here. And hello, Michael. Good to be here with you guys. I'm Vinay, fellow colleagues with Vishesh and Aditya in Team Indus. Was heading business development there for a couple of years. Then after we stepped out, then we started SkyServe in 2020. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. And so let's get started. Let's first dissect the topic of the day. So Earth observation industry, Vishesh or Vinay. So can you let the audience know what exactly is Earth observation industry?
Sure. So Earth observation involves sensing Earth spatially and temporally through active and passive means, through flying or orbiting platforms. So, and currently it's being used for all host of things. For example, weather forecasting, pollution monitoring, agriculture, national security, and a host of other applications. And it's suddenly, although a lot of people are realizing it, but it's been around for a long time. So one of the key things is the great images that we get of high resolution images of Earth. So it's all enabled by Earth observation industry.
Right. So anything the satellite sees from above and the way we utilize it for our applications down at the Earth. So that would encompass the scope. And so, about what would be the major applications for this?
Yeah, sure. So one of the biggest applications would be first mapping the Earth. We have the Earth observation industry giving a huge amount of valuable insights about the agriculture, oil and gas, energy, uh, and in fact, the biggest market for Earth observation is for national security. The government is the biggest customer.
Okay. So, can you break down the value chain of this industry? Who are the major players? Who are the major stakeholders?
Right. So if you break it down, so you have the operators, the satellite operators. There'll be these ground station providers and their downstream analysis companies, which essentially major value chain elements. So the operators are the one which obviously operate the satellites, procure and integrate, build them, and then the ground station providers are essentially the link between the satellite operators and the downstream companies. So essentially get the images, they do telecommanding, tracking, etc. And we have the downstream analysis companies, which are essentially using information from the Earth observation that has been stored on ground, so to make it useful for end consumers. So I could give some examples. For example, the satellite operators, one of the biggest Earth observation companies is Planet Labs, and they are literally imaging the whole of Earth every day. Then the ground station companies, Kongsberg, Deep Space, and analysis companies like Insight, RS Metrics, and these come under value-added services. So it's a huge industry, many players on the Earth observation analysis side. So obviously the government players would be all of these big space agencies, NASA, ESA, JAXA, ISRO, CNSA, so on.
Right. And as with any space tech, I think the government plays a major role in forming the rules and regulations as well as providing much of the opportunities and work, right?
Yeah, true. So they have been so any place where these operators work, there'll be a law of the land. For example, there'll be a remote sensing policy in India, and there'll be an equivalent in the United States, an equivalent in the Europe, and so on. So these policy will regulate that. Say, for example, the sensitivity of the data that you're going to distribute, and things which are good to go and not a problem. Essentially, they would set the rules on what you could do as an Earth observation company.
Okay, next. What threat do Earth observation satellites present to the society? Can you shed some more light on that? Should we be scared or something to how these satellites are constantly monitoring us or other aspects?
I think we should reverse the question saying, why should satellites not be used by us every day? They are the constant support layer who's helping us, be it agriculture, be it oil and gas, be it mining. They're the key critical layer. It's not, although the defense and government have been using it, this is a technology that's been there from 1970s or beyond before that. So I think we should welcome this as a key aspect in our day-to-day businesses and use them as much as possible. There's nothing of privacy that we should be worried about that we have with respect to smartphones and other data compared to just another service that gives you a very high value on how things are happening on the ground.
Got it. Anything else to add from anyone on this important point?
At least in the US, we recently had a company called Umbra, which is one of our portfolio companies, get a license for synthetic aperture radar down to 10 centimeters resolution. And that is enough to be able to tell whether or not there's a soda can in your hand, kind of thing. And this is the first time that license has been down to that frequency and that level of resolution has been allowed in the United States. And this caused at least a few people in Congress to ask about the privacy aspects of these technologies. And that was one of the reasons why in most countries, there are resolution limits. In a lot of countries, those resolution limits were originally around national security interests, so that only their national military could have in-space assets that could go down to those kinds of resolutions. But now that capability is being used by commercial companies, they're coming at it from a privacy standpoint. And that is something that is regulated on a country-by-country basis. There are standing treaties where each country gets to tell any Earth observation technology provider in another country, do not release this kind of data from our country at a specific level of resolution. So when you're in the Earth observation business, you do have to adhere to each country's rules when it comes to what resolutions are allowed to be sold. And that can be a little bit complicated for the companies in the middle of the supply chain for EO that are producing the data, or in some cases when you have an Earth observation product that is combining data sets from multiple different providers, is making sure they're not including something in the final product that violates the rules of those countries. So it's a sensitivity that has to be there. But yeah, I definitely agree. We've been using Earth observation since the 1970s, but it's only in the past really 3 or 4 years that now some privacy concerns are starting to come in within certain countries that have various different views on privacy.
Michael, that is fascinating. I'm curious, the license that you mentioned about, is it for a particular application that we can go down to that resolution, or is it a blanket that one can get?
There's 2 rules. So synthetic aperture radar actually sends a radar signal from the spacecraft down to the Earth and back up. And because of that, you actually have to get a license to broadcast on that frequency. And for that, you have to go to the FCC. And this is purely the way it's done in the US. In the same way that you would have to get a frequency allocation for your satellite to be able to communicate with the ground, standard kind of thing. So there was a concern about the radar being in a new frequency range that had not been previously used outside of the military. But also, most countries are a signatory to an Earth observation treaty that requires national licensing of most Earth observation technologies, especially when you're looking at other countries. So even if and this is an issue a few years ago with SpaceX, where they were putting cameras on the outside of their vehicle just so they could see what was going on. But those cameras were catching images of the Earth from space. And that triggered the Earth observation treaty with the licensing agency in the US, which is NOAA. And NOAA said, SpaceX, you have to get a license for this. But the resolution was so low that SpaceX was like, you can't tell anything. They're like, we don't care. The rule says, the treaty says, if you take a picture of the Earth and you can see another country, you have to get the license. And so they've been since streamlining the licenses for low resolution, but you still have to adhere to the treaty. Like we said, Earth observation business has been around long enough that most countries have gotten fairly good at issuing the licenses fairly quickly. But if you're doing something new in a new observation regime with a new technology, or you're going down to resolution levels that haven't been seen before, if you're in that field, then you need to be aware that your license may take longer than normal to get, simply because the regulatory agency doesn't really know what to do with it. So that's a risk that can happen.
Got it. Thanks. Next, let me go to Aditya, and if you can highlight some of the major challenges in this industry right now, both maybe on the technical aspects as well as the non-technical aspects.
Hey, Pronojit, thanks for having me and the team here. Yeah, so in terms of challenges, I think Mike has just brought up a few of them, which were there for quite some time. I think now we are seeing commercial impacts because a lot of startups have raised quite a bit of money, and regulations really affect both the valuation as well as perception of the industry itself. So in terms of non-technical challenges, those would be right up there, which is regulations. And to to actually put it into perspective, there should be enough regulations to not allow serious misuse of this tech, because you can see quite a bit. You can construct a picture of your friends, your foes, your own market, your supply chain, but there needs to be some rules that one can adhere to. And I think that's a place where technology as well comes in. So if you don't have technology to apply regulations, then it's going to be ad hoc. You're going to have a lot of people wanting to comment but not able to enforce it. So these challenges are certainly there. So in terms of regulation and how it's being applied, the other part is, of course, the price, or rather the market barriers. So today what we have is a few providers of Earth observation data, mostly imagery. They've been established in the industry for quite a while. So they control the pricing. So the access to this data is now by who can afford not just to purchase or pay for a single image, but can you sort of do a block buy? Can you in advance commit to purchasing, say, 100,000 square kilometers of imagery every year? And if you can do that, you can get the sweetest deal that you want, but not everyone can do that. So what we see right now is a few tweets, say by the President of the United States, or a few TV news channels can give a satellite view of something that's happening somewhere else in the world. It could be geopolitics. It could be even, say, the cargo ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal. So it's there. People can see it, but the access is still not really there. So you don't have a mid-sized business who could actually benefit from this. So that's a challenge that we see, that there needs to be new business models that can include this mid-sized and smaller market, because the larger markets are, of course, there. You have large corporations, you have governments that can afford it. So that's one of the other non-technical challenges that I see. So to underline that, regulations and pricing.
That's a good point, I think, which you brought. The democratization of Earth observation industry, I think that is going to be a key going forward.
Truly, yeah. And on tech, there's quite a bit, and there are lots of companies, governments, research institutions coming up with new sensors, new ways to use the same sensor to look at the Earth. But I think in terms of addressing the market, you need a lot more people to come forward and give tailored solutions that answer specific questions, or at least make it easier for someone else to answer those specific questions. So there's two great companies that we've been noticing. So Skywatch and I think our Lula. So both of them are making satellite imagery available almost as a SaaS play. It was not possible before, where you could aggregate across satellite operators and make it available over an API or a common dashboard. But that's something that's really come up, where this sort of tech to aggregate and abstract out who is the source of my information, as long as you can agree to the license terms and distribution terms, you can access the information that you can pay for. And I think these sorts of technology based businesses, I think, can really open up the industry. And these were some of the challenges that were there previously. So you had the same operators, you had the same data, but there was no access. But I think some of the technologies and technical aspects of this have got ironed out. And I think a lot more is going to come. I think this can open it up to probably making Earth observations sort of real time, where you can understand what you want to understand in near real time. And I think that's coming up now, and that's the technological frontier, I think, that commercial markets have to solve.
I would really want to back up what Aditya was saying here. There's a great article series by a guy named Joe Morrison, who now works at Umbra, but before that, he was another company, on how parts of the Earth observation market are broken. And one of those was just how hard it is to actually call up an Earth observation company and say, hey, I'd like to buy an image of this particular spot. And if they can even sell it to you, it could take 6 months before they're able to do it. And it's not really mature enough yet to be able to build some of these real applications that we all have in mind. And it's changing a little bit slowly as these commercial Earth observation companies that are generating the data start to get to the cash flow point where they can feed that back into making access to the data as reliable and easy as the market wants it to be. But we're still not there yet. If you have an application, you want to buy Earth observation data right now, it is a challenge just because of the number of different players, the formats it comes in, the pricing is still way too high. And so there's a lot of challenges, but I think it's getting there. One of the other things that Aditya mentioned was the part of the market that is able to take the data and the analytics and turn that into actionable intelligence for an end user. At Starbridge, one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is looking at what we call the ultimate customer wants. And when we say ultimate customer, it's what is the point where the value proposition really becomes real. So if you're in Earth observation and you want to sell into the agriculture market, it's the farmer. And really, ultimately, it's the person sitting there with a meal on their table, getting ready to eat something, and they know they can trust that the agriculture supply chain is safe, consistent, diversified, and reliable. But the farmer is the one that makes those decisions, and they don't care where the data comes from. They just want to know what's wrong with my crop, how do I fix it, how do I maximize yield at the lowest price. And you need companies in the middle that understand that farmer and understand the supply chain that gets to that farmer so that you can enable Earth observation to solve those problems. The unique thing about agriculture is it is incredibly culturally sensitive, politically sensitive. So it's a country by country, and even in the case of India, state by state, that you need somebody that understands it. When you get into other areas, fire prevention, the ultimate consumer is the fireman in the woods trying to put a fire out. That's one of the challenges that we have right now in EO is we have very few people that act more like consultants that can find out what the actual questions are that the people that have the money and the need that they need answered. And then to feed that up into the Earth observation supply chain to say, yeah, I know you want to build a spacecraft that gets this kind of data, but honestly, nobody cares. This over here is the question that they actually want answered. And that's one of the places we have a big disconnect in the industry right now.
I love those thoughts, Aditya and Michael. I see this opportunity at two levels in that case. First is somewhat of a platform opportunity wherein someone can open up a platform connecting these Earth observation companies and maybe some end users who directly want these images and really democratizing it as Earth observation grows prevalence across the industry. And second is the insights, actionable insights at a use case or an industry level. I think these two are really good opportunities shaping up, as you mentioned. Awesome. So I want to quickly reset the room for those who have joined new. We are talking about Earth observation industry, and we have the founders from SkyServe.ai, which is an Indian startup working on analytics in Earth observation. We have Michael from Starbridge VC, who is into space tech and investments into this sector for quite some time now. So we'll be opening up the floor in just 5 minutes or so for audience questions. So raise your hands in case you want to post some question. And let me continue the discussion by asking Vishesh. So what do you think or how have you seen the uses of AI ML in this industry till now?
Yeah, in fact, ML techniques have been in the industry for at least 3 decades. And since the advances in computing over the last 2 decades have been significant, so that they enable ML as well as deep learning applications to be practical, you're seeing that using them in space is also now being considered big time. So there are quality applications of AI/ML by companies like Ursa Space, Space Now, and Descartes Labs, who are providing general purpose ML models, while companies like, say, an RS Metric or say Orbital Insight, they focus on something very specific. For example, as a use case, let's say for metal ore movement, or say oil tanks, or flare detection, or climate change and fracking sites, and so on. They have been working on industry-specific products, and obviously they are leveraging advanced AI from that for that. But these have traditionally been used and applied on ground. So well after the images have been received on ground, and it takes a while to extract the insights. And if you order an image, probably you would take time to schedule the image collection. There's a collection opportunity needs to come. And after that, there's a delivery to you. So it's not so fast. And it's obviously, as previously mentioned, there's a cost to entry to this Earth observation products. So what could happen now from the perspective of AI ML is to have the applications also considered at the edge. So that means borrowing IoT technology, there'll be edge computing nodes that may be put on satellite platforms. And what I see is that traditionally the Earth observation industry, and I would say it's very, very hard to use the word traditional as well, because we are just talking 6 years back in which the industry has been still making the satellite platforms to do a certain job. So for example, you take images, you store and forward, and that's what they're meant to do. But with the advances in the computing capabilities, you can have these very high efficiency, high compute devices to be placed on board. And you could do a lot of applications at near real time speeds on board satellites itself. It's something that is enabling a little bit of smartness on board. So think about a smart eye in the sky. Although it sounds a little perilous, but think about in a very regulated sense, you're able to do a lot more just by observing, and you're only wanting to push down something very useful. If things are not useful, almost at 30% of the times when you're looking below, you're say looking at clouds. So you need to make sure that you don't waste the bandwidth that you're using with downlinking to 30% of a bandwidth to downlink products, which may be ultimately not useful. So the use of AI/ML is now obviously at this stage in a commercial sense on ground has been huge. There are many, many challenges coming about using Earth observation industry to make deep learning models for object detection, segmentation, and so on. And also finding relationships between so many layers in a single image. You could find out so many layers of meanings that are associated. And these things now will also be available on orbiting platforms.
I want to try and back that up a little bit with some of the things that we see in the marketplace. Especially for those in the audience, there's also a large number of new types of Earth observation technologies that are becoming available that are creating very, very dense data sets. It's gotten to the point where there's still some opportunities in optical, but where we're getting a lot of utility is the combination of multiple different data sets from multiple different sensor types. And one of the big challenges there is determining where, especially when you have data sets that have different levels of resolution, how do you know that they're all looking at the same thing when you're doing your analytics? If you have something that has a 10 centimeter resolution and something that has a 5 meter resolution, where in that 5 meter block is that 10 centimeter block? And how are you geocoding those? But one of the things that's happening is we're quickly getting to what we call data cubes or data sets, single element data sets that are dense enough that, you know, a copy of OpenCV and your standard optical image analytics tools simply don't apply. The two biggest ones are hyperspectral imaging, especially there's Pixel, which is a US-India company, and Orbital Sidekick out of the US that we're an investor in. You have between 300 and 400 spectral lines. So for any given image, it's actually made up of 300 individual images that show the different spectra of what you're looking at. Those are the things that allow you to start diagnosing crop diseases, looking at the arability of land. Are there any contaminants in a water supply? Things like that. And in order to be able to use those, it is very machine learning independent because you have to have external data to be able to build your training sets. And in the hyperspectral world, the training sets are really the valuable thing that is usually IP protected. For example, Orbital Sidekick does not sell data. They sell the output of data. They do the analytics in-house. Other companies will sell the data, but that puts the requirement on the EO, on the analytics company, to develop those training sets. And those training sets are generally kept proprietary. In synthetic aperture radar, you're not analyzing an image, you're analyzing an RF waveform that includes all sorts of data. Is an electrical power line electrified? It can tell vibration data. Is the thing that I'm looking at vibrating, which allows you to tell whether or not a car is turned on or not? There's a lot of embedded information in a SAR waveform that is not about an image. And SAR analytics platforms never actually turn that data into an image. They analyze the raw waveform. And so it's gotten a lot more complicated, but you're finding that the companies, the technologies that separate out the companies that are going to succeed, one is the ability to combine multiple different data sets. In the case of synthetic aperture radar, it's one of the few that allows you to see at night through the clouds. So it gives you a certain level of ground truth, whereas things like hyperspectral, optical, and some of the others, you only get data for about 12 hours out of the day. Then you use SAR to say, well, has anything significantly changed overnight? If not, you go ahead, that kind of thing. So this is a very dynamic market that has a lot of players that are coming in it from the user side, from the application side, all the way up to new technologies that are actually getting kind of freaky. One of the ones that I love is radio occultation data for doing weather reporting. The satellite does nothing but listen to signals from other people. GPS signals are a perfect example. And using that to analyze the upper atmosphere, and is becoming a very powerful weather prediction tool. So, it's the days of simply analyzing an optical image are long gone.
Yeah, I think there's something that I'd like to add, especially on Mike's point about training data. So we actually came across this, I think, in the news 2 months ago, which was that China made their largest, labeled satellite image database public. And it sort of shows the amount of classes that have got identified. So it's all the way from identifying the model of the plane to, categorizing ships, whether they are moving, not moving, what's the speed from the size of their wake. So that's a lot of information. And it's not just an arms race to get the best model out. I think it's also an arms race to figuring out how to train your models, because this is no offense to China, but they have a mechanism that to get trained data sets, and very high quality trained data sets, by hand. And there's no surprise how they may be doing that, but can anybody else match that? Can they match the pace? And forget commercial or government. I think it's going to be a very important skill, or rather, I think now it's resource, to be able to get there and get good quality, because you need to be as good as them. Otherwise, you have serious concerns. And this is probably not the right place to speak about geopolitics, but this is something that we all have to keep in mind, that there will be people with better models, and these technologies can go forward with a lot of resources going behind them. And we need to stay on top of the game, no matter which field we're applying AI, ML, or deep learning for that matter.
Absolutely. That's incredibly well said, Aditya. Thank you for that.
Awesome. I think we have few questions from the audience as well. So I would open the floor to Anand first, who has raised hand. And so Anand, you want to go ahead with your question?
Yeah. So my question is, in what way can this technology be leveraged to tackle some of our environmental challenges? So, for example, things like forest fire or disaster management. Is there a use for this technology in those areas?
Absolutely. I think very recently I just noticed a Twitter bot which takes Sentinel as well as Copernicus Landsat images. Whenever they are uploaded to the servers, it immediately runs an algorithm, finds out a possibility of fire, and immediately posts it on Twitter. So, although this is just an example, but what this is showing is that as soon as satellites are detecting, say, a forest fire, very often you might have cases where you get information within hours, or say of the fire fronts going across, or say building up. And also there needs to be a balance here, as in there needs to be, I'm just talking about the case of forest fires, that if there are too many alerts, you don't want to overwhelm your system. So only the most important problems need to be pointed out. Regarding climate, I have seen plenty of application. In fact, Earth observation industry has been one of the key industries which is monitoring surface level temperatures of ocean, even pollution monitoring that you are doing with, say, for example, NOx emissions, sulfur emissions, and so on. I see that a lot of compliance related problems could be solved using the observation data. And I see that generally one of the key goals that we need to tie is the United Nations SDPs, Sustainable Development Program, so Sustainable Development Goals, to the Earth observation particular variables that could ultimately meet the monitoring requirements. But we have to also go beyond that, so there needs to be action on the intelligence that we get. I'm a little, I would say, I don't have the right knowledge about that on the scope of the action that is being taken. But yes, on the Earth observation part, there are plenty of ways to use it.
Okay, thanks, Anand. Next, we have Artin.
So I have questions in all of the three subjects. So first of all, about Earth observation. My two questions are, what is the least known use for Earth observation? And what is the most fascinating thing Earth observation has ever been used for? And about AI, how do you figure out that, a program is an AI, is technically an AI? And also about entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship and how does it work?
Okay, so I think, Artin, for the scope of this discussion, we'll focus on the first question, the other two being a bit more generic. So we can probably take up in some other platform. But yes, so if anyone wants to go ahead on Artin's first question.
Yeah, I think I'll try to get a least known and a most impressive use of Earth observation. So I think in terms of least known, but I guess we will be listing something that we ourselves know. So one of them, it's national security. So this was pretty cool. Actually, I sort of offhand remarked this in my previous set of sentences I said, which is the previous US President, Donald Trump. He tweeted a picture of an Iranian launch vehicle, a rocket, at such high definition that you could read the name of, I think, one of the contractors listed on the launch pad, as well as the name variant of the rocket, which is printed on the rocket itself. That was just pure imaging. It's not even what you can infer, but there's a lot more that you can know. So that just tells the level of technology that's been put up in space. And the technology that's going behind that is actually quite fascinating to know that the satellite that took that image is as good as, if not better than, the Hubble Space Telescope. Only difference is that imagine Hubble Space Telescope pointing at the Earth instead of away from it. And that's the resolution that you could get. So technology is already there. We probably were seeing an image that was slightly degraded so that we could only read what we got to read. We could probably see a lot more. So that's one on probably not very well known, but it's there. And it's a little scary. I think that's why we all had that question on privacy, but it's there. There's another really cool thing that Earth observation has done, which was to pick up signatures of the lockdown in different parts of the world in around March last year. So you were able to see the signatures of human motion disappear. So you had pollution signals like, say, short-term molecules that lie in the atmosphere, which come purely from combustion of diesel, gasoline. Those just disappeared overnight, especially over the large centers. Like in India, above New Delhi, they just dissipated. Above Beijing, Shanghai, they disappeared. And the reason is humans at once stopped emitting wastes of fossil fuel. So this is really cool because it shows, at least Earth observation is able to pick this up and say, if the humans were to change the way they carry on their life, you can get back to sort of carbon neutral, in fact, carbon negative. That's something that was pretty cool and fascinating for us.
There's one that I discovered on Clubhouse a couple of months ago. There's a project in Africa that uses Earth observation and analytics to follow particular groups and even in some cases individual animals that are endangered, and then are also using the analytics to look for signatures of poachers, for example, vehicles moving in coordination with herds of animals, and can even determine when an animal is in distress, and with using some surface trackers as well. And it's being used to say prevent poachers and identify animals that have been injured so they can get medical attention. And that's being communicated directly using Earth observation satellites and communicating directly to poachment enforcement officials and medical officials on the ground in Africa. That one is a nonprofit that's being built and run purely on individual donations. That one's kind of fascinating. One of the things that most people aren't aware of is some of the things that you can detect, especially using hyperspectral imagery and multispectral. You can detect methane emissions down to a fairly small level of granularity. And you're able to do a lot of identification of methane leaks in the oil and gas industry, methane being one of the stronger greenhouse gases. And so it saves the oil and gas company money because they're leaking, profit out the pipe, but it also helps the environment. And there's a lot of applications like that around methane and CO2 emissions and finding polluters that are not being reported because you can't detect these gases.
Yeah, just to add to that, Artin, in similar lines, we also have like Earth observation looking out for child trafficking or labor trafficking. So I believe it's also making its part in, the societal good as well.
Oh, yeah. So my other question was, let's say, for example, someone just out of curiosity, for example, they want to launch a suborbital rocket, and that suborbital rocket includes a camera. Unless the information on the camera is shared, is it still illegal? I mean, like if the resolution is very, very high and can capture sensitive data.
It depends on the country. If that suborbital rocket is launched within the country and cannot see outside of the borders of that country, then it's up to that individual country, and you don't need to get a license unless the rules of that country specify that if you're taking an image of a particular level of resolution, then you have to get a license. In the US, if you go down to a certain level of resolution in the image, you still need to get a license. But if your suborbital rocket is, for example, on the border between the US and Canada, and your suborbital rocket, even if it goes up, only a few miles, if your camera can then take a picture of something in Canada, yes, you need to get a license.
Thank you.
Thanks, Artin, for your question. Next, we have Parth. Welcome to Clubhouse, Parth.
Hey, hello guys. So my question is with respect to applications in India, two of which I thought was like detecting illegal dump sites, like garbage sites, which are getting generated in India like quite frequently. And second application that I thought was like detecting illegal quarrying, like changes in the mountains and all can be tracked down whether if people are illegally quarrying the mountains. So is like such kind of application is existing in India, and if not, is there enough kind of a good quality of data available to develop such a application or a model?
I think multiple use cases, 100 plus use cases or more by the day. So most mining sites have a particular geofencing rules, and they do go by the rules. There is a Government of India rules as well. It's got passed in the parliament. There's a pilot program as well, which monitors saying if you're doing a particular quarry, how are you to be doing it? There is a GIS solutions, and there are reviews and inspectors who are monitoring it as a set process. That's for sure. Going back to the point on using it for dump sites, I think that's a great use case. Some of thoughts we had also earlier. If you have any use cases that you'd want to explore with, we would welcome you to work with us. We would happy to build out an insight as a service with yourselves. I think one of the things that ISRO has done very smartly as well is in UP, when the house construction was happening for a below poverty line person, they were able to give a construction monitoring service. That's another splendid use case, saying how the systems are progressing, how the infrastructure is being built up. So there are many more, and more the merrier, more we should approach and give this service to all the sectors.
Yeah,
I'm,
thank you.
I'm curious if the use cases which Pat has mentioned is more adept to a drone than maybe a full-blown satellite. What would be the thoughts?
I think the challenge is with, if you're looking quite hyperlocal and if you're looking to operate in a specific area of operations and they have to be there in that area, I think drones would probably be best suited for that. But if you're looking at pan-India or a very large swath or large landscape, I think satellite-based data, giving that as a service, making it affordable, repeatable, those are key advantages for that any day.
Yeah, I would like to add that some private as well as government coal mines are using drones. One of the key issues that they face is when, say, for example, when they're doing coal mining, they do excavation and these OB dumps that are there. The accurate estimation of these dumps is quite important. And because of that, essentially, even if you have a 1%, 2% error, that could cause losses to the industry if they don't estimate it right. So you would need laser-based systems and accurate precision systems. Contrary to that, if you need large area monitoring, drones beyond a point start to be less efficient as a solution, and at the cost of resolution, satellites become much more useful. Say, for example, land use monitoring or a compliance report that the Ministry of Health and Environment does. So this is basically currently drones have been employed in surveying and estimation purposes, and the satellite use has been typically restricted to land use, including, say, for example, quarrying or say illegal deforestation in a mining area, or say for example, compliance activity for meeting certain reforestation requirements over OB dumps. These are things that they are currently being done, and actually the laws are there. It's just that now, since the India's recently passed auctioning for many new coal mines, this needs to be done by many geospatial analysis companies out of India.
Got it. Thanks for your question, Path. We'll extend this room for a few more minutes maybe and just learn about SkyServe and their story. So up to Vishesh, Aditya and Vinay. So let me first ask you, what motivated you to get into entrepreneurship and found SkyServe?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, so uh, so this might be common for all three of us. So because we met at another startup and we were involved in quite a bit of the core of a startup, which is working on difficult problems, seeing where the market goes, be aware that a need and the technology that we may develop, both of them have a meeting point, which is it needs to be commercially viable. There needs to be a business plan around it. And this sort of intrigued me, which is try and see if you can make an impact. And while you're doing that, it is profitable. It's a virtuous cycle, because if you can do it commercially, you can do it for longer. You could do it probably sustainably, but if you were to do it as an NGO, like say you want to get more adoption for observation across the world, you can't just give data for free. You can't give insights for free. You can't build a foundation that just gives out freebies. You need to make it commercially incentivized. So these problems actually were what sort of brought us together, which is if we can get this sort of common good is purely because of physics of being in space, you can observe quite a bit. Fitting a business case that brings this closer to people, that's something that was really attractive to me. And we could, of course, work a 9-to-5 job in an Earth observation company, but I think we had some different ideas that we wanted to experiment with. And that's what me here. I think my two co-founders might echo this. So over to them.
Yeah, I would say I just wanted to fly, and I had a huge amount of fascination for space, robotics, autonomy, and the thought of actually doing something new in space. So, yes, I've been more pulled towards that, and I understand that you cannot just do this off your own. I would like to have a team with me. So Aditya and Vinay were a great team. And obviously, it has to be rooted on the ground. So somebody has to value what we're doing. So yeah, that was motivation for me.
The key thing was to give out a solution where we could. We had a great time being a part of Team Indus, where we had been hands-on solving all the toughest challenges. And when we came out, one of the things was to make this an ubiquitous layer, give this to businesses where Earth observation can be used in a very simple service, yet it flies and gives this to businesses on a day-to-day basis. So those things got us all going together and trying saying, how do we solve here? How do we solve here? These are frictions and stuff. And that started the journey.
Got it. Can you talk me through that, what you learned from the mistakes or the failure of Team Indus, so to speak, and then what value proposition did you build SkyServe on?
Respectfully, I think one of the we had been a part of a very, very vibrant, tech-savvy environments in India as a private player. If things had gone our way, we would have been talked about in a very good way. Unfortunate that we go through something as a pioneer's curse. There are a lot many things that are different, lot many things are the dynamics are new. So that's tough luck. The beauty of it is we went through a journey, we went through a certification process, we built some critical IP, a great set of team members who were passionate, who wore this thing on their sleeve and toiled it day and night. No doubts about that. Then going on to the journey afterwards, that's any space mission is a patient capital mission. The service that we were in, we had to give this value on to the customers or to the businesses on an ongoing basis to fulfill our passion and build this value layer. And then when we got together, initially Aditya came up with the idea of the Earth Observation Service. Then we came back saying, should we make it as a model? How do we make this affordable? Vishesh came back and said, why don't we make this insights in a certain way that it could be delivered in a rapid time? So we said, why can't businesses use it every day, like simple, like a Microsoft Office kind of a thing? So all those things started developing, and that's how we started conversing again and again and putting some frames here. Yeah, or to Vishesh and Aditya to add more.
Yeah, one of my learnings was particularly that first of all, I would not classify it as a failure. So it was a great pioneering attempt. One of the main learnings for me was to have a little bit of balance between, if you say, for example, at the time, we were looking for a lunar logistics business model. And I think a lot of it was dependent on government contracts. So it's important that probably we'll have to do a balance. So it was important for me personally that it needs to be made sure that the value is immediately felt, so that there's a cycle through which we build solutions and then essentially go for something more exploratory. All this being said, I would say another great learning was that I could really build and work with a great team. So it was not so hard. It was 6 years starting from scratch. So we were literally, when I joined, there were like 4 or 5 people, full-time members, and at a point we grew to 100. And so I kind of saw some of the ways through which say an organization matures. A lot of learnings from talking to people, even interviewing, building a team, looking at people go. So very interesting time there.
I'm going to butt in real quick and just back up everything that the team here has said. I was a co-founder at Maston Space Systems. We were building vertical landers back in 2004. And I met Team Indus at the first Moon Village Association conference in Strasbourg, and have always been incredibly impressed with the team, the ability to do things quickly, efficiently. And I would not consider Team Indus a failure. Anybody that was willing and able to build a team around that goal, as badly funded as Google set the price, because the prize needed to be much higher, and a lot of other structural issues. But yeah, it's the pioneer's curse. Everybody that's done this, I can tell you that the pain that I suffered back in the early 2000s trying to build Maston, we all have arrows in our back, and it's a challenge. So anybody that gives it a try is immediately successful, in my opinion. And no, I do not think that Team Indus failed in any way, shape, or form.
Other than that, I think So the learnings and the aspects which we gather from the experiences, that's what makes us. So what are the kind of insight now that the SkyServe provides to its customers? Can you take us through a few of them?
Yeah, sure. So the working model that SkyServe is pushing towards is to enable processing of satellite sensor data on board and send back just the result. So this is more of a platform model where we keep our interface as just the satellite. So we don't build the satellite, we just build the intelligence layer and give it as a platform to developers and analytics companies on the ground to push their model on board and then receive the results of whatever their models or algorithms compute on board. So the type of insights that we've been involved with some of the analytics companies who are working with us is mostly in agriculture and land use change. And these cover, in fact, a very broad set of user industries. So land use change is not just used by governments to know what's happening. It's also used to understand push of urbanization, which is very, very useful for real estate companies, very good for financing, insurance. So these are the use cases that we see which come out from the insights. But as of now, we are not directly reaching out to the end users. So we are enabling these analytics companies who already have their models, who figured out and cracked certain markets. We want to give them a leg up so that now they can work a little more efficiently. And if they want real-time insights, it's there for them in a scalable manner. It's not dependent purely on can you commit to purchasing bulk sets of images upfront. It now matters more how many times do they want to compute on data when it's available to them.
Got it. And so, what would you say are the major advantages or USP of SkyServe vis-a-vis some of its peers or perhaps future peers in that case? So, what do we do differently or something that we have as an IP that we can call out?
So in terms of USP, the first thing is that we're trying to make this a software play. So the software is our core IP, which is the ability to process raw sensor data and bring out intelligible inputs on which machine learning models could probably, say, detect objects of interest or, say, count objects of interest. So that's the biggest USP that we feel gives building blocks for people to build more value on top of. Of course, there's another part to it, which is we've started off building these computers as well. So this hardware is IP in itself, but we want to abstract this out for the user. So they would not know that there's a box somewhere flying up in space, which is computing this for them. The most valuable thing is actually the software, the application that's running on that. In a way, I think Vinay actually calls this as the sort of iPhone moment where you appify observation, so to speak, and you're making an otherwise single-use piece of hardware, that's the satellite, a multi-use hardware which is defined by the app that's running at any given point in time. It's not defined just by its sensor specs, the orbit it is in, or what it's looking at. It's the app.
Sounds fascinating. Thanks. So, next, I would like to ask Vishesh to have a rundown of the technology that's being in play at the background and also maybe perhaps highlight few of the AI/ML capabilities that we are building into this platform.
Sure. So we've got two major components of our solution that we're building. So one is an orbit part, the space segment of the platform. So it consists of a processor, high-performance edge computer, flies on nano and micro EO satellites, and we run proprietary firmware to interface with the host satellite. So, and then the middleware that allows installation to third-party analytics, which Aditya mentioned as apps, could also be running on this. And we'll be tasking them so that we make this whole software defined. So this will be programmable. And the other part of the solution that we will be building on the ground side, which is a suite of cloud and locally hosted applications and software packages that allow users and developers to interface with the orbit segment. And they could publish new apps, they could program insights, and they could monitor tasking and finally get their products and results out. And regarding the say, for example, the AI/ML part and what we are doing. So we use several kind of models that we are building. One of the key things that we are building is a full data pipeline to do an image pre-processing as well as downstream processing. So currently we have started with multispectral sensors. So we have built models for, say, land use, cloud detection, segmentation nets, and plenty of them. So in fact, while we were doing the research on this and we were able to look at all the permutations, combinations, it's not just the models, but also how you work with parallel data sets and fuse this together. So I was estimating that you could even come up with 100,000 or more use cases out of this. So yeah, broadly, that summarizes the solution. But we are doing some work on the pre-processing and the downstream models, and some of them are based on deep learning models.
So what would be the biggest technical challenge right now? Is it like some real-time application or something else?
So one of the things that I feel is that from our end, there's the technology problem from the hardware. So we're currently, a lot of these edge computers are, if we're taking commercially off the shelf, we'll have to qualify them. But that's something that we are experienced enough to do that. But then a larger challenge from our point of view is that ultimately, if you cut through what would be the end goal, say at what point nobody thinks that there's something new to be added in Earth observation, is when you get some real-time insights which goes across time, space, and even spectra of information, and the kind of resolutions that you could get. So with the examples that Michael, Aditya were mentioning, so we are looking at a host of sensors potentially coming up. So we would want to make sure that our solution is agnostic of the platform that is flying under, so a satellite platform, as well as the sensors that it's flying. So we'll want to have solutions which is catering, and it's catering to them, and as well as kind of a plug and play for the satellite per se.
Got it. In interest of time, let me ask final question. So, do you think that SkyServe is a bit too early for this industry right now, or do you think we are just at the right point at the start of the wave?
I don't think SkyServe is early. SkyServe is, we should never be in the market when the market says a buzzword. When e-commerce is cool and if the market says so, that's crowded. We are building critical IP blocks. We are building a critical service for the businesses here. And we are at the right time. Probably we are delayed as well in some of our internal thoughts by 6 months to 1 year. We see that this market requires this service as quickly as possible and getting this on an ongoing basis for the businesses, solving key problems across the globe.
One more thing I want to point out is that a lot of people assume that there's a limited demand, but from foot on the ground, we've talked to many businesses. A lot of businesses don't even know the value of the Earth observation industry. The industry hasn't touched them at all. So I think as we are reducing barrier to entry, we are reducing latency. Probably this is a completely new market as well that we are potentially building. So I think from the being early point of view, I see it pretty optimistically, and the time to build, I feel, is now.
I echo that viewpoint. I think, especially in the Indian space industry, I see a lot of movement in the last 2-3 years. And with that, the opportunity to sculpt the future of this industry in India specifically. So that really bodes well for whoever is looking to capitalize on it now. Michael, you had something to add on that.
Yeah, I want to agree that they're definitely not too early. There's a lot of EO companies that were too early and didn't survive. So now I think is actually very much the right time. Just a couple of thoughts for SkyServe and anybody else that's in the EO business. One of the trends that we are seeing are discussions from large cloud providers for putting data centers in geosync. So instead of needing to offload your very data heavy data sets down, one of the things that you're finding is you can go out and you don't have any of the frequency limitations, landing rights issues, or anything like that. So you can stream your data directly from your Earth observation satellite directly to a data center with large amounts of storage setting up in geosync. And so, whatever your cloud infrastructure is, having it containerized so you can switch it from a terrestrial data center up to a geosync data center is something to at least be thinking of and preparing for. The other is, as we see in other parts of the space industry, there is a strong incentive and strategy around vertical integration. It's very easy that if you're solving a single solution in the middle, but your suppliers and your end customers, that customer that realizes that ultimate value proposition, if there's somebody between you and them, then you're not entirely in control of your own fate. Somebody else can come along and displace you. You also don't have the ability in that model to strongly protect your margins. And so for anybody in this business, EO, I would start trying to get as close to the entities that realize that ultimate value proposition. There's some perfect examples of that in ag tech in India, where, for example, Satsure using commercially available EO data, but now they're building those constellations. They deal directly with the farmer standing in the middle of the field, but they figured out a way for the Indian government to help them do that. You're seeing other applications where you can leapfrog over a supply chain that may not know how to understand the value you can bring, but the ultimate customer desperately needs the knowledge that you can generate. Deal with the supply chain downstream that you need to, but have a strategy to figure out how to, put the information that you're generating directly in the hands of whoever needs it. As quickly as possible, start thinking about vertically integrating your marketplace as a strategy, because that's how you protect your margins. Those are just two of my thoughts. Would happy to talk directly to the SkyServe team at any time after this to kind of dig into the business a little bit.
Sure, that would be great, Michael. And I think valid inputs, and I think we probably need to have a little deeper head-to-head, probably to understand both the insights and as well as how we might impact the market better with the knowledge that there is value in both verticalization as well as like these utilities that are coming up, and the geography that we might play. I think it's different in each geography. I think especially out in the US, you have a lot of holding companies that are pulling up all the way from launch to downstream analytics. I think we've seen Firefly all the way to EOS doing that. And I think that's very interesting. I think it's a great time to be in.
Awesome. And thanks for those inputs. So we'll open up for some final couple of questions. We have Harsh already on the stage. Anyone else wants to have a question, please raise your hands. Harsh, over to you quickly.
So thank you, sir. Am I audible? Sir, my question is, how does CubeSat contribute in Earth observation, and how can an Indian student launch a CubeSat from India for Earth observation?
Great question, Harsh. So if you are in any one of the Indian universities or engineering colleges, I think you will be having a connect to the state space research organization, and they usually are very welcoming of student satellite projects. If you have a good proposal that has some science or say technology demonstration that can leverage a CubeSat form factor or any other form factor which can use the free launch service that Indian Space Research Organization gives, it's very much possible. So you could write directly to the agency, or you could go through your university path if they already have a connect with the local remote sensing center or office that's nearby. So the headquarters is in Bangalore. You could reach out to them. I think on their website also they have opportunities. So there's, I think, been at least 10 university satellites launched so far from India. Yeah. So it's very much there. And just to give a comparison, the company that Vishesh mentioned, Planet Labs, they are using CubeSats to update the picture of the Earth every day. And those are CubeSats. So, and Mike mentioned about radio occultation to predict weather. That's being done by a company called Spire Global, which is again using CubeSats. So it's literally now size doesn't matter. It matters as to how you're using the data and how you're able to make an impact on the earth.
Thanks, Harsh. Next, we have Subhash. Welcome, Subhash.
Hi. My question would be like, first of all, I feel good to see Indian startups venturing into space tech. That's really good thing to see. And my question for this SkyServe team is to like, we know, and you have already been spoken about those things like the B2B applications or government related applications of space tech as the observation applications. Do you see any B2C kind of application, even not in immediate effect, but at least in near future, like Google Map and other than that?
Good question. Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, but I don't have any answers. I'm actually very fascinated by Earth observation B2C applications. There is one that I know of. In the US, it's called myradar.com. They built a weather app, and through the in-app advertising, and it's a standard mobile, but they were putting very accurate, very hyper-local weather information in the hands of individuals, and that was their entire business model. So it's B2C. And they've gotten to the point where they are now starting to fly their own CubeSats to be able to give them weather information. There's another radio occultation company out there called GeoOptics that's now working with a company called Climavision. And so you're seeing some direct B2C weather applications that are purely commercial, putting up their own spacecraft and doing EO directly to the consumer. And that's sort of one we already sort of understand. And it's kind of easy to wrap your head around what the business model might be. But the ones that fascinate me are the fun ones, the weird ones, even the downright silly things. Like what would happen if you integrated Earth observation data into Pokemon Go? Because, for example, with hyperspectral, if you get the data right, you can start identifying make and models of cars. So if you're walking around, one of the things you could do is whenever you see a 1969 Volkswagen Bug, turn that into a Pokemon monster and you capture it. You could do fun things like that. So I haven't seen a lot of those, but I would really, really like to see some creative ways of putting EO data, beyond Google Maps into the hands of consumers. So yeah, if somebody comes up with something really goofy and fun, let me know.
I really like the Pokemon idea, Michael. I hope someone takes that.
I think one of the things that we could do is, Subhash, connect it back to MyGate application. Go back to which of these apartments are looking at it. You go back to say which of these have got lockdowns, they don't have it. Which of the toll booths are following it, not following it. There's so many of them that's possible. I think the canvas is wide open for us to build out some very unique use cases. If you have any, we're welcome to talk offline and see what we could build together.
I had a goofy idea.
Go ahead, Vishesh.
Yeah, so although we had thought about it, but this is absolutely having no, benign purpose. So we could get an idea called selfie from space. So you basically get over your house 10:30 in the morning, schedule a capture from the local satellite, and that high resolution satellite, if it's capable, delivers you the image instantly. So
That is an interesting one.
I like that, especially if you can say,
love that.
Yeah, especially if you can get not just optical, but if you combine some of the other ones and like that, yeah, that would be really, really fun. I would love that.
Vishesh, I
We
think
got some users.
definitely at least 2-3 users here, right here.
Yeah.
Okay, Saurav, thanks for your question. And I think that is it for today. So thanks to Aditya, Vishesh, Vinay for coming on this session. Thanks especially to Michael for joining us and providing your thoughtful insights as always. And thanks to all the audiences who have been patient with us and for the great questions come up. Look forward to some other interesting discussions in the weeks forthcoming and take care. Thanks, everyone.